A young soil scientist named William Albrecht is staring at two fields of soybeans. Same seeds, same rainfall, same sunlight, same planting date. The only difference is invisible to the naked eye. One field received standard nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizer. The other field received trace amounts of copper and zinc, just ounces per acre, an amount so small that the fertilizer industry considered it meaningless. An amount that cost almost nothing compared to the tons of conventional fertilizer farmers purchased every season. The results destroyed everything the fertilizer industry wanted farmers to believe. The trace mineral field produced plants with 3 times the protein content, 3 times the mineral density. Roots that penetrated twice as deep, stalks that resisted disease without chemical intervention, yields that matched or exceeded the conventional field while creating food that was actually nutritious. Albrecht documented everything. He photographed the plants. He analyzed the tissue samples. He measured the soil biology before and after. He published his findings in academic journals that farmers would never read. He presented at conferences that industry representatives attended with increasing alarm. The fertilizer industry had spent decades convincing farmers that 3 numbers mattered: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK, the holy trinity of modern agriculture. Every bag of fertilizer displayed these 3 numbers prominently. Every farmer learned to chase higher numbers for higher yields. Albrecht's research proved the entire system was incomplete. Those 3 elements produced bulk. They produced volume. They produced impressive yields that looked good in photographs and weighed heavy on scales. But they did not produce nutrition. They did not produce health. They did not produce food that actually nourished the humans and animals who consumed it. The trace minerals that the industry ignored were the elements that mattered most: copper for enzyme function, zinc for immune response, manganese for photosynthesis efficiency, boron for cell wall strength, molybdenum for nitrogen fixation, iron for chlorophyll production. These elements existed in healthy soil at parts per million, invisible, unmeasured, unprofitable. The fertilizer industry made a calculated decision. They could reformulate their products to include trace minerals at minimal cost. They could educate farmers about the full spectrum of soil nutrition. They could produce food that actually nourished people rather than merely filling stomachs. Or they could bury the research and continue selling what they had always sold. The industry chose burial. By 1950, William Albrecht's work had been pushed to the margins of agricultural science. By 1970, most agricultural colleges did not teach trace mineral nutrition. By 2000, the average farmer had never heard of the research that proved their fertilizer was producing nutritionally empty food. This is the story of the discovery that could have transformed human health. The minerals that triple soil vitality, and the industry that made sure you would never learn about them. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Let's begin. The science of trace minerals begins with understanding what plants actually need to produce truly nutritious food. High school biology teaches that plants require sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. This is technically true, but radically incomplete. It is like saying humans require air and water while completely ignoring the vitamins, minerals, proteins, and fats that determine whether we thrive or merely survive. Plants require at least 17 essential elements for complete nutrition and optimal health. 3 come from air and water: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The remaining 14 must come from soil through root absorption. The fertilizer industry acknowledges 6 of these as primary nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. They systematically ignore the final 8 entirely, despite their critical importance. These 8 ignored elements are the trace minerals that Albrecht identified as essential: iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, chlorine, nickel. They exist in healthy soil at concentrations measured in parts per million. A single acre might need only ounces of each element annually. The amounts are tiny. The effects are enormous. Consider copper's role in plant metabolism. Copper activates enzymes that control lignin production. Lignin is the compound that gives plant cell walls their strength. Without adequate copper, plants produce weak stems that collapse under their own weight. They become susceptible to fungal infections that penetrate flimsy cell walls. They require chemical fungicides to survive what healthy plants resist naturally. A few ounces of copper per acre eliminates the need for pounds of fungicide. The economics favor trace minerals overwhelmingly. But the economics of farming are not the economics of the fertilizer industry. A farmer who needs less product is a customer who spends less money. Consider zinc's role in protein synthesis. Zinc is essential for the enzymes that assemble amino acids into proteins. Without adequate zinc, plants produce carbohydrates but not proteins. They fill storage organs with starch but not nutrition. They yield bushels of grain that contains calories without sustenance. This explains a paradox that nutritionists have documented for decades. Modern crop yields have increased dramatically since 1950. Bushels per acre have doubled or tripled for most major crops. Yet the nutritional content per bushel has declined by 30 to 50% depending on the nutrient measured. We grow more food that feeds us less. The trace minerals that Albrecht identified in 1928 are the missing explanation. William Albrecht spent his entire career at the University of Missouri documenting what healthy soil required. He did not begin as a radical or a critic of industry. He was a conventional agricultural scientist who followed evidence wherever it led. His early work focused on soil, bacteria, and their role in nitrogen fixation. His research was funded by agricultural organizations that expected useful results. What Albrecht discovered was too useful. His experiments demonstrated that soil biology depended on mineral balance. Bacteria that fixed nitrogen required molybdenum to function. Fungi that delivered phosphorus to plant roots required copper for their enzymes. The living soil ecosystem that produced healthy plants could not function when trace minerals were depleted. Conventional fertilization made the problem worse. Heavy applications of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium created chemical imbalances that locked trace minerals into unavailable forms. The more NPK farmers applied, the less access plants had to the copper, zinc, and manganese already present in soil. High-input agriculture was systematically starving plants of essential nutrients while appearing to feed them. Albrecht documented this phenomenon in papers that the fertilizer industry wished he had never written. His photographs compared animals fed on minerally complete versus minerally deficient forages grown on different soils. The differences were immediately visible and deeply disturbing to anyone who examined them carefully. Animals raised on complete nutrition displayed robust frames, healthy shining coats, strong teeth, and vigorous reproduction. Animals raised on deficient nutrition, despite adequate calories, showed skeletal abnormalities, patchy dull coats, severe dental decay, and reproductive failure. The implications for human health were painfully obvious to anyone willing to see them. If mineral-deficient feed produced sick animals, mineral-deficient food would produce sick humans. The same crops that failed to nourish cattle would fail to nourish people. The chronic disease epidemic that began accelerating in the 20th century correlated precisely with the adoption of NPK-only fertilization. Albrecht said this publicly. He wrote papers connecting soil minerals to human health. He gave interviews warning that modern agriculture was creating malnutrition in the midst of abundance. The industry responded by ensuring his work never reached mainstream awareness. The burial of trace mineral research followed the same pattern as other agricultural suppressions. The fertilizer industry did not need to ban Albrecht's publications. They did not need to threaten his career or discredit his methodology. They simply needed to ensure that his findings never influenced commercial practice. They accomplished this through control of agricultural education and extension services. Land-grant universities depend on industry funding. Research grants come from fertilizer companies. Endowed professorships carry company names. Extension programs distribute industry-approved recommendations. The institutional structure of agricultural education creates dependency that constrains what can be taught. Trace mineral nutrition was not forbidden. It was simply unfunded. No grants supported research into copper and zinc supplementation. No professorships specialized in micronutrient soil science. No extension bulletins explained how farmers could implement Albrecht's findings. The knowledge existed in academic archives while disappearing from practical agriculture. By the 1960s, the three-number system had achieved total dominance. Every fertilizer bag displayed NPK ratios. Every soil test measured nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Every farm advisor recommended applications based on these three elements alone. The 8 trace minerals had been erased from agricultural consciousness. The industry had not merely buried research, They had redefined what farmers understood fertilization to mean. A generation of farmers grew up believing that soil nutrition meant NPK and nothing more. They had no framework for understanding why their yields increased while their crop quality declined. The fertilizer companies sold more product every decade. The farmers struggled with pest pressure, disease outbreaks, and declining animal health that trace minerals would have prevented. The consumers ate food that looked abundant but provided less nutrition with each passing year. Everyone lost except the industry that manufactured the deficiency. The nutritional decline in modern produce has been measured repeatedly. A landmark study published in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition in 2004 compared USDA nutrient data from 1950 to 1999. The researchers examined 43 different garden crops, including vegetables and fruits that American families consumed daily. They measured 13 essential nutrients, including protein, calcium, phosphorus, iron, riboflavin, and vitamin C. Their methodology was rigorous, and their data sources were impeccable government records. Their findings confirmed what William Albrecht had predicted and warned about 70 years earlier. Average nutrient content had declined significantly and measurably across all crops measured. Calcium declined by 16%, iron declined by 15%, phosphorus declined by 9%, protein declined by 6%. Riboflavin and ascorbic acid showed similar losses. The food that Americans purchased in 1999 contained measurably less nutrition than identical foods purchased in 1950. The researchers attributed this decline to agricultural practices that prioritize yield over nutrition. They noted that modern crop varieties selected for high yield, rapid growth, and pest resistance had not been selected for nutrient density. They observed that soil depletion of trace minerals reduced the raw materials available for nutrient synthesis. They concluded that industrial agriculture had fundamentally compromised the nutritional value of the food supply. The study received minimal mainstream attention. The findings threatened to many industries. Fertilizer companies could not acknowledge that their products contributed to nutritional decline. Food companies could not acknowledge that their products contained less nutrition than previous generations enjoyed. Agricultural organizations could not acknowledge that yield increases had come at the cost of food quality. The study joined Albrecht's research in the archive of suppressed agricultural knowledge. Consumers continued eating food that filled stomachs without nourishing bodies. Doctors continued treating chronic diseases that traced back to nutritional deficiencies. Farmers continued applying NPK fertilizers that perpetuated the problem. The cycle sustained itself because no one with power benefited from breaking it. The restoration of trace minerals to soil requires understanding what has been depleted. Soil testing is the essential first step. Standard soil tests measure only NPK and perhaps calcium and magnesium. Complete soil tests measure the full spectrum of trace minerals. Laboratories such as Logan Labs and Midwest Laboratories offer comprehensive testing for under $50. The investment reveals exactly what your soil lacks. Most agricultural soils show deficiencies in multiple trace minerals. Decades of NPK-only fertilization have depleted reserves that once existed naturally. Zinc deficiency is nearly universal in high-yield grain production. Copper deficiency is common in soils that have received heavy phosphorus applications. Boron deficiency affects fruit and vegetable production across most regions. Application rates are measured in ounces or pounds per acre rather than tons. This is the economic reality that the fertilizer industry never wanted farmers to understand. A 50-pound bag of zinc sulfate costs approximately $40 and treats several acres. A 50-pound bag of copper sulfate costs approximately $50 and lasts multiple seasons. The annual investment in trace minerals rarely exceeds the cost of a single NPK application. The sources matter for effectiveness. Sulfate forms of trace minerals provide immediate plant availability. Oxide forms release slowly over multiple seasons. Chelated forms resist soil lockup in high pH conditions. Matching the source to soil conditions maximizes response. Application methods include broadcast spreading, banding near rows, and foliar spraying. Broadcast applications treat the entire soil volume and provide long-term correction. Banding concentrates minerals in the root zone for immediate crop response. Foliar applications bypass soil altogether for rapid correction of visible deficiencies. The response to trace mineral application often appears within a single growing season. Plants display deeper green color as chlorophyll production increases. Pest pressure decreases as strengthened cell walls resist invasion. Disease incidence drops as enzyme systems function properly. Yield may or may not increase, but nutritional density consistently improves. The food you harvest from minerally complete soil will nourish you in ways that depleted soil cannot. The $200 billion fertilizer industry strongly prefers that this knowledge remain permanently obscure. Every farmer who truly understands trace minerals is a farmer who spends significantly less on conventional fertilizer products. Every gardener who corrects micronutrient deficiencies is a gardener who needs less pesticide and fungicide. Every consumer who demands nutrient-dense food is a consumer who challenges the entire industrial food system. The industry cannot openly oppose trace mineral nutrition. The science is too clear. The benefits are too documented. The costs are too low. Direct opposition would expose the inadequacy of products that companies have sold for a century. Instead, the industry maintains suppression through silence. Agricultural education continues, ignoring trace minerals in favor of NPK-focused curriculum. Extension services continue recommending fertilizer programs that exclude micronutrients. Soil testing laboratories continue offering basic tests that reveal nothing about trace mineral status. The farmer must seek out this knowledge deliberately. It will not arrive through normal channels. It will not appear in mainstream farm magazines supported by fertilizer advertising. It will not be taught in agricultural programs funded by industry grants. It exists at the margins where profit motives do not control information flow. William Albrecht spent his career trying to reach farmers with knowledge that could have transformed agriculture. He succeeded in documenting the science. He failed in overcoming the industry that benefited from keeping farmers ignorant. He died in 1974, knowing that his life's work had been deliberately marginalized. But knowledge does not stay buried forever. The copper and zinc that Albrecht studied in 1928 are still waiting in bags at agricultural supply stores. They cost almost nothing compared to the fertilizers that farmers apply by the ton. They require no specialized equipment to spread. They provide benefits that persist for years after a single application. They represent the simplest possible intervention in a food system that has systematically malnourished 3 generations. The fertilizer industry hoped you would never learn what you just learned. They hoped that Albrecht's papers would yellow in archives that no one visits. They hoped that the connection between trace minerals and human health would remain obscure to everyone except the researchers they could not silence. They did not anticipate that knowledge spreads differently now. They did not anticipate that farmers would find each other online and share results that extension services refuse to acknowledge. They did not anticipate that gardeners would demand soil tests that reveal what basic tests hide. They did not anticipate that consumers would connect their chronic health problems to the depleted food that industrial agriculture produces. A 90-year suppression is ending. The 3 numbers on fertilizer bags are not wrong. They are incomplete. They produce bulk without nutrition. They fill bushels without nourishing bodies. They sustain an industry without sustaining the humans who consume what that industry helps produce. Copper, zinc, manganese, boron, molybdenum, iron. These are the elements that the industry removed from your awareness. These are the minerals that triple soil vitality when restored to depleted ground. These are the nutrients that your food no longer contains because no one told farmers to put them back. William Albrecht told them the truth. The fertilizer industry made absolutely sure no one listened. Now you finally know what William Albrecht knew almost 100 years ago. Ounces per acre. Pennies per pound of produce. Real nutrition that your grandparents took for granted, and your grandchildren have never once tasted. The 1920s method that was lost can be found again in your own garden and farm. It was never truly gone. It was only deliberately hidden by those who profited from your ignorance. If this opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and share spreads what they tried to bury for almost a century. See you in the next one.